Dear Mr. President, as a nation, the economy is not going like it used to be, and the debt that the government owes towards many countries is piling up into crises that cannot be paid easily. The government also owes money to the people through Social Security and military pensions. Trailing the debt is a national deficit.
When you look at the fiscal cliff from far away, it looks like a vertical drop, but get a bit closer and it looks like a staircase, right? Let's start with the first stair, the debt ceiling. That's how this all began, remember. The debt ceiling is the total amount the U.S. government can borrow to meet its existing obligations. We hit it at the end of 2012, though default can be avoided into 2013 through what the Treasury Department terms extraordinary measures. In the summer of 2011, House Republicans refused to raise the debt ceiling without an agreement to cut government spending. The result was a debacle, a downgrade of U.S. credit for the first time in history, and the formation of a committee to solve the problem later. And thus, the threat of the fiscal cliff is born. Now, without a new deal, on January 1st, tax hikes, they kick in, $661 billion for next year alone. Those include the expiration of the so-called Bush tax cuts, an end to the payroll tax holiday, and an expansion to the alternative minimum tax, or AMT, for high-income earners. Americans will start to feel those when the first paychecks of the new year arrive. The third step is called the sequester, which kicks in January 2nd. Those cuts amount to $78 billion next year. Some companies with government contracts have already pulled back on hiring. Some have slowed work. But most Americans won't truly feel the effects of the sequester, the spending cuts, until the middle of next year. We're talking layoffs for private sector and government employees and cutbacks in the services Americans rely on. That's the timeline. It doesn't happen all at once, but even if the threat of the fiscal cliff is flirting with disaster during a fragile economic recovery.
It's becoming a major issue because the revenues are not making enough money that goes towards the economy. The nation needs a solution to solve these issues that are hurting us. Borrowing money from other countries is building up to where the government cannot pay it all off and is ruining the economy. The economy is being robbed through foreign trade because jobs are being outsourced to other countries.
I hear about jobs leaving New York and leaving America and going overseas. And then there's some talk as this is inexorable. It is not inexorable. And that's what we're here to say tonight. We can do something to stop this. And stop it we must. Manufacturing used to be the backbone of our economy. It supported millions of families, was the staple of middle-class communities. It's no secret what happened. Company after company after company began sending jobs to China and Vietnam and Malaysia, to Mexico and Brazil and parts of South America. These countries have lax enforcement of work rules, environmental rules, and pay rules, so it's cheap to produce goods there. We've heard the statistics, how the United States lost millions of manufacturing jobs in the last 10 years. In New York, 90,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 3 years alone. 1/3 of our manufacturing base has disappeared nationally. In fact, I recently read that the United States has lost 42,000 factories since 2001. 75% of those factories employed more than 500 workers. The bigger factories leave. 42,000 factories closed, most of them employing more than 500 people. And Mr. President, I think of the people I've met who have lost their jobs. One of the most cited studies, and it's cited among conservatives, predicted that by 2015, 3.3 million U.S. service jobs will have moved offshore. So if you think you're safe because you're not in a manufacturing job, forget it. No one's safe. No one. Whatever your income level is, whatever part of the country you're in, whatever industry you're in, no one's safe.
As a public opinion, we should eliminate government-based businesses because there are already private sectors doing the same job. Majority of spending are going towards Social Security and future retirees. Medicare is being offered to majority of the nation, and this is where most of the government spending occurs. Changes must be made as a nation because if it does not, then the U.S. will ultimately be ruined. The government needs to firstly reduce the amount of foreign trade because our government are buying products over at other countries than actually manufacturing and selling U.S. products.
Michael Johnson off of Twitter says it's impossible to reduce the long-term debt unless you first balance the budget. Every year there's a deficit, the debt grows.
Well, that's true. And we have modest. It sounds so. Mike is right. I I wish I could say our goal is to balance the budget every year. We find that to be a political illusion. You know, our debt as a percentage of GDP for the last 30 or 40 years has been less than 40%. It's only in recent years that we've seen it climb 60%, 70%, 80%. Some people say we're at 100% now, and there's a big fight among economists that's relatively arcane, but the fact of the matter is we're entering dangerous territory. We only say at the Bipartisan Policy Center, let's get it down to 60% of GDP. That's not great, but it is a level that we think is sustainable. It's a level the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and other international organizations have said is fairly healthy. Mm-hmm. I don't want anyone to be under any illusions. Demographics and the programs we put into place structurally cannot be paid for in the future without enormous indebtedness, continued devaluation of the dollar, or eventually not doing much else than paying people their pensions, their health care bills and stuff like that. Because we're getting, in the next 10 years, we're getting close to where interest payments plus all the entitlements will do almost all of the spending for the federal government.
There should also be an increase in age when it comes to Social Security and future retirees, because with Medicare, they are living longer than they used to, and so they are retiring at the age of 50.
We've heard from Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid that he does not think Social Security should be on the table, that no one is touching Social Security is what he has said. But centrist Democrats, like yourself, and there are more of them now in the Senate, say we're willing to compromise on this issue. What's the payback from party leaders?
Well, there's change and then there's change. As you'll recall in, what was it, 1982 or 3, back in the 80s, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan got together and made some adjustments to Social Security that saved the program. That's my point. Sometimes you need to adjust and change to save the very thing that you care most about. And so Tip O'Neill didn't sell out the Democratic Party by embracing that agreement. The Democrats in Congress, many of them very progressive at that time, who supported it, weren't traitors to the party. So I think if we do it in a responsible way that's balanced and doesn't just gut the programs and is just not all entitlement reform with no revenue, I think the base of the party and leaders in organized labor will understand. And they also know that the alternative is either A, doing nothing with bad damage to jobs in the economy and ultimately insolvency of these programs themselves, or B, the right wing of the Republicans are coming in and taking over because we've done nothing to solve the problem, and their answer to the solution would be much more draconian.
Let's go to Jack. He's our first phone.
To this, they claim an X amount of money every month depending on their last paycheck they received before retiring. And this shows that they are working for 10, 20 years for a reasonable amount of money back from the government for the rest of their lives. To this, the country needs to make some sacrifices so that we can prosper and achieve more in the future. The country needs a better change that will achieve more than what we have now. We need a change that will lead this great nation towards a more and successful path. This path isn't going to be a smooth one, but it's a path that we as a nation must go down so that the nation can once again bring back what the country created, and that is the American dream.